If you're a teacher, then one aspect of your day that really frustrates you is definitely the fact that your students don't turn in their work. I'm sure that you've been in a situation where you've written down exactly what you wanted students to do. Maybe you even wrote down what you wanted them to copy onto their tablet or assignment, and they still didn't do it. Maybe you even gave them the answers and they didn't turn anything in. Or you set a firm deadline 1 week away with plenty of time to complete it, and they still didn't turn it in. In today's video, I'm going to discuss not only why your students aren't turning in their work, but I'm also going to give you some tips that you can implement so that you can get a higher submission rate. But first, could you please submit a like and subscribe so that the YouTube algorithm will give me an A+ and show it to other teachers like yourself. Some of the typical reasons why your student didn't submit anything. First, they're procrastinating. Second, poor time management. They simply forgot. And also, they misplaced material. Now, these are the typical reasons why students don't turn in assignments, but here are some that maybe you didn't think of. Number 1, fear of failure and also confusion. So a lot of times students are confused and they don't want to advocate for themselves to get more help. You are going to have a few students that are actually going to ask you too many questions. You know what I mean? When they're asking you and they really know the answer, but they just want your reassurance. Love those kids. But for the students that don't submit their homework, it's because they are confused and either they are too ashamed or afraid to ask you, or they don't know who to ask. Let's say that they're at home and they have a homework assignment and there's no one there to help them. Well, they don't want to try something that they don't know how to do and feel stupid about it and fail. So a lot of times they would just rather not do your assignment at all. Now, the next one is similar to fear of failure, and that's perfectionism. So you probably have had some students in the past who have to make everything perfect. They've got great handwriting. Their assignments are always turned in, very legible and neat. It's always on time. But there are also those students who take it a little bit too far, where if it isn't perfect, they might even rip up the assignment or just refuse to submit it at all if it's not to whatever their perceived standards are. Now, you may just be happy to accept an assignment from them, period. But for them, if it's not perfect and if it is below their own standards, their unusually high standards, they may just be too fearful to turn it in or too ashamed to turn it in at all. Similarly, another reason why they don't submit the assignment to you is because it's not done. So to them, they don't want to turn in something unfinished. Now, maybe you won't accept something unfinished, so that could also be part of it. But maybe you just want any assignment from that student at this point. Maybe they have all zeros and they have half completed assignments and you'd be willing to take those half completed assignments. They may not know that, and they may just assume that since they didn't finish it by the deadline, you won't accept it. Another reason is that they're just overwhelmed. So it's not just your assignment that they have to do, but maybe they're like a senior or a junior in high school and they have 4 to 5 advanced placement classes. That's a lot of homework for them, I'm sure. Or maybe another teacher in your grade level gave a ton of homework, maybe like 10 pages that they had to do. And even though you only gave 2, maybe that one 10-page assignment is worth more in that class compared to the 2-page assignment in yours. Now, I know they shouldn't pick and choose which ones they do, but the reality is that if one assignment is worth more and is going to affect their grade more in a different class, we're probably not going to do yours. So a lot of times just the overwhelm from just too much homework from too many teachers can cause them just not to submit an assignment for your class at all. Another reason why a student might not submit an assignment for you is because of their mental health issues. So along with the other feelings of perfectionism and of overwhelm and things like that, sometimes a student just can't mentally get themselves to start an assignment because they feel like a failure or because they feel like it's too much, or they're worried that they're going to disappoint you in some way. And so they just don't start it. Also, mental health issues could have to do with things that are happening at home. So if a student is having their parents go through a divorce, or maybe one of them is deployed in the military, maybe there's a death in the family, or just some kind of bullying in school. There's so many issues that could be causing your student to feel a lot of anxiety or depression or just anguish in general. And that's keeping them from even starting the assignment, which means obviously that they're not going to to turn it in. And finally, and this one is kind of hard to swallow as a teacher, they just might not be motivated to do your assignment because they don't see any value. Students are pretty savvy and they know when teachers are giving busy work. So if you give them 100 problems that are pretty much the same thing that they're doing over and over again, or if you're giving them, let's say, a packet of homework and they know that you don't grade it, they're probably not going to be motivated to do it at all. If what the work that you're giving to them seems worthless and doesn't have any educational value, they're probably not going to do it. It's just the reality of it. They have other priorities and other things that they would rather do than your homework that they don't really seem to be getting much out of. So aside from threatening students with their grades or calling home or giving detention or something like that, here are a few ways that you can try to get your students to submit assignments. The first one is a little bit philosophical, and that is you grading assignments in class. So what this looks like is you are going to walk around with your tablet or a laptop or just some kind of clipboard, and you are going to check off whether or not students are doing their assignment. And this makes it so that you don't have to take time later on after the fact, and it also ensures that if the student sees you grading the assignment right then, they're more motivated to work on the assignment and complete it because they know that you're checking it right there and then. Now, if you don't like doing that, another way is to have them submit their assignment in class, whether or not they're done. And so this is also a little bit of a philosophical shift because some students work slow. They work really slow, but their work is on point. Their work is correct. A lot of times they get an A+ on assignments. It just takes them longer to think. I remember I had a student who would take forever on an assignment in class that would take students 15-20 minutes, and he would take 2 hours, but he always got 100% because it was always accurate. Sometimes you can have students submit assignments whether or not they're done, but still you have to pair this with the other way of walking around, because then that'll lead some students to think, okay, I don't have to do any work, I can just submit it and I'll still get credit. So this also requires you to rethink, am I okay with taking partial work if that partial work is correct? So if out of the 50 problems, students did 20, but all 20 of those they got correct, should they still get 100% or should they get less than 100, like half of the points? Something you need to ask yourself. Another way that a lot of us are doing in terms of submitting assignments is submitting them online. You could also use something like the Remind app and have students download that to their devices, their phones or tablets or computers, and use the Remind app to send out a reminder to them so that they can submit their assignment when they're at home. Now, if you haven't done this already, you can also solicit the help of parents. A lot of times, parents do want their child to succeed, well, hopefully most of the time, but they don't necessarily know how to help their students. I know it seems obvious to you maybe as a teacher, like how they could help their student, but they don't know. They don't necessarily know what the deadlines are. And even though you might have gone over it during open house, it doesn't mean that they remember. So sending a reminder to the parents, either through, again, the Remind app, you could ask them to sign up for that for your class. You can send them messages through your online grading system. You can send it through email, just some way of letting the parents know, hey, I sent out an assignment today. I really need them to submit it tonight. Can you please help your student? If you use it in that kind of language, they're more likely to help you out. And finally, one way that I think is kind of fun, but could be a little bit dicey depending on your class, is a collaborative submission. So what this means is that it's an assignment where each student has to complete a different part, and they can't submit that until every student has done their part. It's a way of them holding each other accountable, but it can be a little bit tricky if one person is holding everybody up. However, if they know that there's that one person who's holding everybody up, they can put just a little bit of peer pressure on them to get them to submit it. It also really greatly depends on the groups that you create for that type of a submission, but it can work really, really well if you do this right. So in general, it's important for us to consider the reasons why students aren't submitting it, because it might be the assignment, it might have to do with some mental issues with the students, and we have to craft our game plan based on that. If a lot of students aren't submitting our busy work, then maybe we need to give them less busy work. Or maybe if we tend to submit assignments that students come back and it's incorrect, then maybe we haven't taught the subject enough, or we haven't taught that particular concept enough, and so they're not going to submit it if they're confused. A lot of it has to do with some reflection on what's happening with the student work and what we're doing in class. And when we meld those together and we try to make sense of it, that's when you're going to end up getting a higher submission rate. So what if you've gotten yourself in a sticky situation where you're just painfully behind on grading assignments? We've all been in that situation where we just have stacks of assignments staring at us, and students may be even asking us, hey, when are you going to grade my assignment? I got you covered. Click here to find out some ninja hacks to fast tracking your grading when grades were basically due yesterday.